Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the new strong and weak picks for patch 8.6. Now, I am still running an RP giveaway as well right now, so if you would like to enter into that and you haven't already, then be sure to check the link down in the description below. But with that being said, let's get started. So to start it off here, we've got some buffs to Caixa. I'm giving this one a 3 rating because I do think this should make her significantly stronger for patch 8.6. She's getting a range increase from 500 up to 525. Her Q range is also getting increased. Her E minimum move speed is getting increased by quite a lot actually. It's getting increased by 15% at all ranks, and the E charge time is also being lowered. So overall, with all 4 of these buffs combined, I think this will bring Caixa up to a pretty good spot in 8.6, and she should now be at least an A tier 80 carry for next patch. So next up here, we have some pretty laughable buffs for Lucian. To be honest, I'm really not too sure where Riot is going with these changes here, but I'm only giving this one a 1 rating because I really don't think this is going to affect Lucian at all. His passive energy return is getting increased by a little bit, and then his ultimate's damage is getting increased at later ranks. If they increased his ultimate at rank 1, which they didn't, I would have rated this probably a 2 or a 3, but because Lucian is not a scaling jungler, and because he did not really get a change that helped his early game out at all or anything, I just don't think this change to his passive or his ultimate will really make him much stronger for 8.6. Now moving on from that little bit of a depressing change to Lucian, we have a little bit of a better change here to Lucian. He's getting a W damage increase, and it's actually getting increased by 25 at rank 1. A lot of the time with Lucian's W, you don't really use this for straight up poke in the laning phase, but a 25 increase there on the damage at rank 1 is actually quite significant. And then his ultimate's AD ratio is getting increased by 5%. So these are nice changes for Lucian. I am only giving this a 2 rating though, because I still think he's not going to be that great next patch compared to a lot of the other AD carries. So Recon is getting some pretty good buffs for 8.6. He's getting an AP ratio increase on his Q as well as on his W. And for a support champion, you might not think that an AP ratio increase really means that much, but when you consider that Recon usually does rush an Ardent Sensor, he also buys Remnant of the Watchers, he is getting a decent amount of AP from both those 2 items there. So a 30% increase on his damage combo is actually quite significant for 8.6. His E range is also getting increased from 600 up to 700, and then his E range towards Xayah is getting lowered from 400 to 300. So they're trying to make him a little bit stronger with other AD carries and a little bit weaker with Xayah. But overall here, what you can get out of this change is that Recon's all-in combo now is actually going to deal quite a bit more damage. I am giving this one a 3 rating here because I do think that in this patch right now, Recon isn't all that bad of a pick, and I think that with these changes, this might push him up into a very good spot for 8.6, and he could be considered one of the top tier supports now. So all of the following changes to champions are going to be due to the changes to Duskblade. So Duskblade is getting a change in next patch to where the damage on the proc is being lowered by quite a bit. So in the early ranks, it's getting lowered from 65 down to 30, and then at the later ranks from 320 down to 200. And to compensate for these nerfs to Duskblade, they're buffing pretty much every champion that would build Duskblade as a core item. So we're going to go over all of those champions now. So the first champion getting compensation buffs here is Kane. He's getting a W bonus AD ratio increase as well as an ultimate bonus AD ratio increase. Now before you pick up Duskblade on these champions that are getting buffed, you will be stronger. It's not until you actually get to the point where you'd buy your Duskblade to where you might be a little bit weaker. So in the early game, most of these assassins here getting buffed in next patch will be stronger, and then once you do reach the point where you would buy Duskblade, a lot of them might be a little bit weaker. Now, very similar to Kane, Nocturne is also getting some scaling added onto his ultimate there. His ultimate is also getting a bit of a base damage increase, and this really shouldn't affect Nocturne for next patch. The damage they're adding on there to his ultimate should make up for the damage that you will be losing from the Duskblade. So the next changes here to Khazix are pretty interesting ones because even though they are compensating him as well for the Duskblade nerfs, I feel like they might be compensating him a little bit too much and giving him a bit too much power, especially for the early game. What they're doing is they're increasing his Q's isolation damage, they're decreasing his Q's base damage, and they're also increasing his Q's AD ratio. Now I think that this will actually make Khazix stronger in the early game because I'm pretty sure the Q isolation damage increase there will outweigh the nerf to his base damage. So if you do find an isolated target in the early game, you should be dealing more damage as Khazix in 8.6 from 8.5. So overall, the reason to why I'm giving this one a 3 rating is because Khazix does have the ability to pressure really hard in the early game, and because they're buffing his early game here, it doesn't really even matter that Duskblade is getting nerfed, because if Khazix does end up snowballing the early game and he gets ahead because of these buffs, then having that nerf to Duskblade really won't affect him at all if he's already snowballing anyways. Very similar to Khazix here, Rengar is also getting a few different changes. He's getting a Q80 ratio increase, an E80 ratio increase, and then also his ultimate is getting an 80 ratio increase. So in total there, he's getting a 40% increase in 80 ratio on his full combo. And I am giving this one a 3 rating because I think that combining all 3 of these buffs here will outweigh the nerf to Duskblade. So now Shaco's buff that he's getting is very similar to Khazix. I'm giving this one a 3 here because this actually buffs Shaco's early game. His Q did not deal any damage in previous patches, but when you use your Q now, your first auto attack after you use your Q is actually going to deal damage. So this will make Shaco's ability to snowball the early game stronger in next patch. And similar to Khazix there, if you end up snowballing the early game as Shaco and you get ahead, then the nerf to Duskblade really won't matter all that much. And then Talon is getting a similar buff that Nocturne and Kane did. He's getting more so of a buff to his later game. He's not getting any buff to his laning phase or anything, so I am giving this one a 2 here because this won't really help Talon's ability to snowball during the first few levels. Once he does get later on into the game, it will help him out a little bit, but that's not really where assassins are supposed to shine. They're supposed to be able to snowball the early game and get a really good lead going, so this change shouldn't affect Talon too much. Now Wukong is also getting another one of these scaling changes. His Q's bonus 80 ratio is getting increased from 10% at all ranks up to 50% at rank 5, but considering you don't actually max your Q out a lot of the time on Wukong, this buff isn't really going to affect him very much at all because it won't really come into effect until you do reach the mid to late game, and once you do reach that point, it should pretty much just outweigh the nerfs to Duskblade. And then the final assassin getting the compensation buffs is Zed, and I don't think these changes should make him much stronger for next patch. They'll make him a little bit better in the early game. His ultimate there and his Q are getting some pretty nice changes, but overall I think that Zed will still be a pretty good assassin for 8.6. If we move on to taking a look at a few item changes now, the first one is to Abyssal Mask. You can no longer get the bonus AP damage amp on champions like Cassiopeia or Ryze, so this is going to be pretty much dead on those champions, but on tank champions, the AP damage is getting increased from 10% up to 15% there, so it's getting buffed for tanks and nerfed for mages. Now there are a lot of different changes here to Rageblade for next patch, so I'm not going to go over every single one of them. Basically a TLDR on the changes is that Rageblade is now going to be more of a scaling item. It's not going to be as strong as a first item anymore, and it will now be a little bit stronger on melee champions because the amount of auto attacks you need to proc the Ginsu's Rage passive is now going to be lower for melee champions. With all of these different changes here, it is a little bit too hard to tell exactly like when champions are going to want to pick this item up now. The cost on the item is getting decreased, so that would make it seem like it would be a little bit better of an early game item, but because the base damages on it are getting decreased and because the passives now have bonus scalings on them, it does seem like it would be a little bit of a stronger late game item. So Rapid Firecannon is getting a buff next patch. It's not really that significant of a buff though. It's only getting buffed by like 10 damage in the early game and then by 20 damage in the late game. So this really shouldn't affect champions too much. It's just overall a small little buff here to AD carry champions. Now, a more significant change in next patch to attack speed items is to Static Shiv. It's getting a damage decrease, and it's also no longer going to deal double damage to minions. So I think that this might be a change to where less and less AD carries go Static Shiv second now, and we might see more AD carries going for like Rune in second or Rapid Fire Cannon second. I don't think this should really affect it should affect how strong AD carries are in 8.6, but it might change the build path that AD carries are going for next patch. So Sarris is getting a little bit of a nerf in 8.6. This definitely will not, in my opinion, influence whether champions now go for like Ludens or Hex Tech. I feel like champions that were going for the Archangels in previous patches are still going to go for it in next patch, but it's just going to be slightly weaker. The shield is being lowered from 20% of your current mana to 15% of your current mana, and the shield duration is also getting lowered by 1 second. So they're not touching anything to do with like the CDR on the item or anything, so it's still going to be a great item on Cassiopeia and Ryze and all of those tier stacking champions, and it's only going to slightly affect those picks for 8.6. And then lastly here, to round out this video, we have some changes to summoner spells. The first one is to heal. Heal is getting nerfed to where the cooldown is getting increased from 240 seconds up to 270 seconds. And then we also have another indirect buff here to assassins. Ignite is getting buffed in next patch. The damage is getting increased in both the early game and in the late game. So with a lot of these assassins getting directly buffed, and then with Ignite also getting buffed in this next patch and heal getting nerfed, that is definitely some nice changes for assassins heading into 8.6. It's going to indirectly nerf these like mage champions in the mid lane that were taking heal, and it's also going to nerf like AD carries in the bot lane, and it's going to make these all-in supports that were taking Ignite in previous patches a little bit stronger for 8.6. So that is going to be all for the most significant changes heading into patch 8.6. If you do want to take a look at more of these smaller changes that I didn't cover in this video that just won't really affect champions very much at all, then I will leave a link down in the description below. But with that being said, guys, if you did enjoy the video, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.